Welcome to Hiraeth, the home of modern Welsh politics. It's been a tough year to be a Conservative in Wales. An election defeat in July saw the party lose all of its MPs, and with the Senedd elections approaching, polling shows Reform gaining support. However, a leadership election is underway in Westminster. Can the party regain ground before the country goes to the polls? To discuss this and more, we are joined by James Evans, member of the Senedd for Brecon and Radnorshire, and Welsh Conservatives Shadow Minister for Rural Affairs. Hi, James.
All right. How's it going?
Thanks for coming back. It's been about 5 years or so, I think, nearly enough since you were on.
I know we'll be out on good behaviour. We'll probably be out even quicker now under the new rules of the Ministry of Justice. But yes, it has been about five years coming at it. So,
James, it has been a bit of a tough year for the party. What are your reflections on the election campaign?
it's one of those things. I hate looking back. I'm a positive person. I like looking forward. But it's been very challenging. I think it isn't just now. It goes all the way back to the Brexit referendum. Cameron, Theresa May, Boris, Liz Truss, Rishi Sunak. 5 different leaders in as many years. Turbulence in government, and I think people lost their faith in the Conservative Party. We're supposed to be the party of stability, of continuity. Being Conservative means it doesn't like change much, doesn't it? So in a way, we kept changing and reinventing ourselves all the time. There was David Cameron's version of conservatism, then you had Theresa May's version, and you had Boris's version of it, and then so on and so forth, right the way up to Rishi. And I think messages got mixed. 1 minute we were supposed to try to be a bit more populist, then we were trying to be more liberal, then we were trying to be more right wing, and I just think the messaging was too mixed, and I think the country punished us for that. It's whatever people think of Liz Truss's mini budget. She was pushing ahead with it, then she U-turned. It was a change again. Boris was pushing ahead with some reforms. We'd have a poll come out that didn't like the reform, and then all of a sudden there'd be a U-turn on it, and we wouldn't be doing that anymore. And I think you lose credibility then in government, and I think people wanted a change. We've been in government 14 years. And I think people do get a bit of a government fatigue sometimes. People have enough of one party ruling. I wish the same could be said about Welsh Labour, but in the Senedd. But I think that is a problem, and I think we just run out of steam, really. And I think there's only so many versions of the Conservative Party you can be. And I think, after I said, the electorate lost faith, lost trust in us. And I think at the last election, people I spoke to on the doors, there were natural, I would say, Conservative voters stayed at home because they didn't feel like the party represented them anymore. And that comes from all different wings of the party. I class myself as a centre-right Conservative. Then you got people who are centre-left. But it was right across the spectrum. People said, well, the party doesn't represent me. And I think that was a problem that couldn't really be addressed. And I think we need a bit of time and reflection now in opposition to work out what party we want to be. We've got a leadership election going on at the minute, which I'm sure you'll probably want to talk about, and some of the candidates. I can see you raising your eyebrows, so that probably will work. So I'll leave that for your questioning. But I think we just need a bit of time and reflection, and be a good opposition and hold the Labour government in Westminster account. It's very important. Any good government needs a very good opposition, because government shouldn't have free rein on things. And I think that probably was a problem for us during the Jeremy Corbyn era of the Labour Party. There are more internal wrangles going on there, very similar to what happened to my party. People trying to oust Jeremy Corbyn, the opposition was weak. So the government really feels like it's got a free hand. And I said, my key ask of all the leadership candidates, even though I am backing one, has always been, you've got to be a sound, credible opposition to hold the government to account. Because if you're not, then unfortunately the country will just slide into decline. It's all parts of this political spectrum need to work to make functioning government a success.
So, from what I'm hearing there, James, you do think that the losses in Wales were more a symptom of the perceptions of the Westminster Party rather than that in Wales?
Yeah, I do. I speak to people on a daily basis. I'm very connected to my communities. I was out having breakfast yesterday in the old railway line cafe. Very good place to go in Three Cocks. Tell anybody to go there. But it's one of the things I talk to people there. There's so much that, I won't say anger towards Welsh Labour, but the way the Welsh government have dealt with things. But at that national level, I think a lot of our MPs fell foul of just the national picture. People wanted the Conservative government out. It was a vote for anybody but the Conservatives. And unfortunately, that's what cost Faye Jones a seat in my part of the world, and other MPs right the way across Wales. There were some fantastic Welsh MPs that lost their seats, and it's a shame that we don't have them anymore. But hopefully some of those will come back in the next general election, or to help the party rebuild, because they're good people. But we just need to bunker down now a bit, realize who we are, what we are, and then I'm sure people will start to come behind us again. Fingers crossed.
So you mentioned there, obviously, the Brecon, Radnor and Cwmtawe seat went from Conservatives to Lib Dem. Why do you think that was specifically in Brecon, Radnor and Cwmtawe? Obviously, the boundary changes must have come into it a little bit. It turned it potentially into a more Liberal Democrat friendly seat than it had been in the past.
No, I dispute that. Everybody says, "Oh, it's good for the Lib Dems," and I don't believe that. I actually thought our main challenges were going to be Labour, not the Liberal Democrats. And actually, if you look at the vote share for parties, the Liberal Democrat vote didn't go up. It went up a fraction, a 0 point something percent off the top of my head. It may be a little bit more, but not much. So David Chadwick, who's the MP here, didn't win it as such. We lost it. We lost a seat. There are other political parties at play, which a lot of people who would naturally vote Conservative went to, but that also hurt the Labour Party. You mentioned reform in your opening. Reform are a problem. They're not just a problem for the Conservative Party, they're a problem for the Labour Party. And I was canvassing in Cwmtawe and down in Neath, which will be new part of the Senedd seat as well. People were telling me down there, they don't not vote in Lib Dem. They don't want to vote Lib Dem. They think they're non-existent in that part of the world. They're not going to vote Labour because they don't like what Welsh Labour's doing, and they can't vote Conservative for historical reasons. And you think, well, where are these people going? And they also are voting Reform. So they're a problem not just for the Conservative Party, but for Reform. But in Brecon and Radnor, the Lib Dems didn't win it. The Conservatives lost it. And I think that's because our messaging was mixed and our voters simply just didn't come out and vote. The Lib Dems are notorious. I was calling it the Japanese knotweed of politics. They never really go away. But it's one of those things, they just keep coming back and they get their vote out. They're exceptionally good at doing that. And I think learnings for my party needs to be is we have a core vote. We need to enthuse that to get out to vote. And I think probably a period of reflection in opposition now will be able to actually galvanize what we want to be going forward. And then hopefully that will encourage people to vote Conservative again, which I sincerely hope they do, because the party that some of our support is going to is not very Conservative, actually, when you actually get underneath most of their policies.
So you've said you've picked a candidate. Before we get into that, I'm intrigued on your thoughts of the recent Conservative Party conference. From the people I've spoke to, everyone seemed to be in quite good spirits. Do you think that is because of the leadership election, or do you think that is, I think, a reflection of maybe the performance of the UK Labour Party in government?
I think it's a bit of both. I do think it's a bit of both. I was up in conference one day. I love conferences, but I've become to a part of my life now. I think I'd rather come home and sit in front of the fire with Emma in an evening rather than going up to Conservative Party conference. But it's lovely to go up there and talk to members. And a lot of people will tell me they're very happy, because I think that we've got an opportunity now with the leadership election to shape the future of the party. What I hope in that is there are, I would say, candidates from different factions of the Conservative Party, probably people from my side of the Conservative Party, and then probably from others. But I think the start that the Labour Party have had, I don't think anybody has had a worse start in government. What the Labour Party have had in Westminster, winter fuel allowance, free gear Kia, that stuck, isn't it? With free suits, and his wife having free clothes, Angela Rayner taking free clothes and party in Ibiza. I'm not quite sure what set she had on that booth, but it'd be interesting to know. But it's all those things which haven't helped the Labour Party really start with that. This is a different government. Keir Starmer said he was a government for change and national renewal. Unfortunately, a lot of people I speak to think it's a party of just the status quo. They took freebies, they've taken money off pensioners, and they don't really care about the working people of this country. The people they said they were going to support, with Ed Miliband going around the country, saying he's going to plaster the whole of the United Kingdom basically in wind turbines. In my part of the world, that's gone down like a cup of cold sick. The people in my part were very angry about that. And so nuclear energy's off the table now. Stuff that my party I think failed on that as well. We talked a lot about it, but actually we haven't had a new nuclear power station built for generations here. So I think the mood was buoyant. I think there was a little bit of concern of where do we go next, but I think the party's up for that fight, and that's what I got from members. They want to get out there, they want to talk to people. I've been out on action days across my constituency, talking about winter fuel, talking about different things that people care about. And people aren't happy at the minute. They're not happy with this new government in Westminster. So we shall see. Time will tell. But I think on the current trajectory, things are looking okay for the Conservative Party.
It's interesting here you talk about that, James, about that feeling that you need one candidate from different parts of the party. What do you think the party needs to do with its new leader? Do you think it needs to move to the centre, theoretically, traditionally, where elections are won from? Or do you think it does need to try and reclaim some of that vote it has lost to reform?
Do you know, it's one of these things that people, I do it, I'm guilty for it, say the centre ground. What is the centre ground? The centre ground moves all the time.
Yeah,
Sometimes
absolutely.
it moves to the left, sometimes it moves to the right, and sometimes it sits actually probably bang in the middle. So my personal view is it's about policy, it's about what you can do for people. I've got policies which some would class as right wing. I've got other views on things like assisted dying, which are extremely liberal. So, my views sway from all across the political spectrum. So I hate this view of, oh, you're either centre or you're right. So it's where the party wants to go from that, and that's up to the
Mm.
members to decide. I am a member, I'm backing one candidate who's probably on the right, we say the right-hand side, but has got probably more fiscally conservative ideas and perhaps more conservative ideas in terms of social values. People I speak to are down the rugby club where I go most Saturdays for a pint. As I said, they don't talk to me about right or left. They just say, "Well, what are you going to do to help me?" And I think that's one of the most key messages which politicians lose. It's more those conversations which you need to have with people. How are you going to improve people's lives? And am I going to feel a difference in my pocket at the end of the month?
It's a really interesting point, James, because I think there's a tendency amongst those of us really heavily involved in politics to sort of try and box everybody into neat categories in their head that makes it easy for us to comprehend everything. Whereas I think actually a lot of voters, what they want is competent politicians who will do what they say they're going to do, right? But I think
Yeah.
what a lot of the discussion and narrative that has been coming through the first couple of weeks of the Conservative leadership election is the idea that there's a binary between trying to win back sort of centre ground Labour voters and Liberal Democrats, maybe those kind of voters you were talking about before who didn't feel enthused by the party, and then
Mm.
perhaps trying to win back some of those voters who have gone to reform because they were potentially thinking that the Conservative Party weren't conservative enough for them. Um,
Mm.
but what's your analysis on that? Do you think that is a bit of a false binary, or do you think there is some elements of truth to that?
There is some element of truth in that, but I think we get too tied up in it. We've got to win back reform. If we don't win back reform voters, we'll never win. Or if you get the polls opposite side of it, perhaps people who back the James Cleverly type of the campaign would say we need to win back that. Theresa May, for example, come back saying reform isn't a problem. You need to win back the Lib Dem support. But unfortunately, the Lib Dem vote hasn't gone up in Brecon and Radnorshire. We've not lost votes to Lib Dems here. So I don't see that. I think but politics has become very polarized, doesn't it? You said yourself, heavily involved in politics. You like to badge people, or you're right, you're left, you're extreme right, that person's a communist, that's it. But actually, I don't think people care that greatly about this, about policy. But it all stems back, I think, to the Brexit referendum. I think that's where people got more polarized in their views and opinions of what people thought. As you look at David Cameron, for example, I've heard someone say he's the most right-wing prime minister we've ever had because he had Brexit. Well, David Cameron brought about same-sex marriage legislation, which was probably more liberal policy than the Liberal Democrats would bring out. So politics has changed, but I think, as I said, my view is, yes, we need to win back reform voters. We do need to do that. I think we've allowed reform as a Conservative Party to become a problem, but it's not just the Conservative Party, that's also the Labour Party. I said there are certain parts of the north of the country, certain parts of the South Wales valleys, Merthyr, Llanelli, Blaen y Gwent, even parts of my own constituency down in Ystrad area, ex-industrial areas, not really conservative. Labour traditionally have been their party, a party that supports workers' rights, supports the rights of people, supports the working man. And I speak to people down there and they think Labour's gone far too much, as I would say, or people would say, to the left, more pushing a green agenda, trying to force people into different types of employment, removing heavy industry. You say whatever people say about Tata Steel, it's disastrous, all the jobs that have gone there. but Labour have banned open cast mining in Wales. So, there's little things, some people who I've spoke to down in the south who will be natural Labour voters who think that Labour tell them a pack of lies over Tata Steel. They said, well, we want steel production in Britain, but we won't produce any of the natural elements which help produce it. So it's difficult, and I think that it's a problem for everybody. But I say we need to get away from polarized politics and back towards policy and substance. And I think the sooner we can get that back there, in my view, I think it'd be better for the public and also better for political reputations.
100% agree with you, James. So obviously this is the big reveal now. By the sounds of it, you've made your mind up about who you're backing. Would you mind telling us and why?
Yeah, so I'm backing Robert Genrich, and and I'm back. Robert is probably seen as one of the right wing candidates in this, but I don't see it that way. I've spoke to members who, previously been Lib Dems, moved to the Conservative, like Robert, like what he's got to say, like his stance, the reform vote type, like his stance in immigration. But what I like with Robert is I dealt with Robert personally when I was a county councillor, when I was last on your podcast over the Mid Wales growth deal. He helped deliver that when he was what they call it. It was a sort of local government minister, but it was called community secretary. It was called then. And he actually helped deliver the growth deals across. He was very keen. He met with me about 4 or 5 times. How's it going? What can we do? Stuff around, one time, growth deals wouldn't fund sort of infrastructure projects. I said to Robert, well, in my part of the world, we need to invest in infrastructure, broadband, power, roads, anything like that. Robert said, that's fine. I'll go away and change it. If that's what you need to make it work, I will make it work. Then I went to him with a proposal when I was speaking to him about a March's growth deal, because, as you know, Matt, I live on the border between Herefordshire and Powys, which is in Wales. People move back and forth across that border. People do business back and forth across that border. And I said, well, can we put something in place which it was quite revolutionary at the time, of actually a growth deal that works across government, across local authority, between the marches, so Shropshire, Herefordshire, and Powys, Monmouth, and yeah, that was it, Powys, Monmouth. And it was all working all together, and it's delivering. It's already started delivering, and I think that's a real positive. Robert was keen to do that, and that's why I back him, because Robert's a deliverer, and he says what he means. And Robert isn't the most shoutiest person in this contest either. And Robert said to me, we need to get past, polarization and more about policy. And I think Robert could do that for us. But that's my personal view. I'm sure there's other views. People might think that Robert's too right wing on some issues. But by all the conversations I have with Robert, and he cares about Wales as well. That's another thing, First thing, I said I knew Robert when he threw his hat in the ring. I didn't back him then at the time, but he actually turned around and said to me, "Oh, what can I do? What can I help with in Wales? If I was leader, what could I implement to help you?" And I thought, oh, that's nice. You've reached out, rather than actually him telling us what to do, which has been the case for quite a number of years from Westminster. It was the other way around. How can I help you? And I thought that was really refreshing. And I think he's the person that can bring across political spectrum back together, in my opinion. And I think he'll be a good leader of the Conservative Party. But regardless who wins, the political infighting in my party has to stop then. It's like, right, this person is leader. They will lead us into the next election. We need to all galvanize behind them and help them deliver. There can't be none of this fracture groups of what are the ERG going to do next. What's the One Nation Conservative group going to do? We're not going to. And I just think that's the wrong way to run a party. And I think they should all bang their heads together after and think, right, this is the new leader, this is their policies, and we'll all go out there at the next general election. And Senedd election, they'll be quite pivotal to do with that, of helping say what the National Party could do, and just get out there and deliver. And I think if we do that, I think we look competent again, and people will start voting for us. That's what I think. Some people may think I'm absolutely crazy, but that's my opinion.
It's interesting there you talk about the kind of relationship that the Welsh Conservative group have had with Westminster for the last few years. And you've been on the record saying that the Welsh Conservatives needed to create some sort of clear blue water between yourselves and the UK party. How do you think you go about that? And do you think now that the UK party is in opposition, that makes it slightly easier to do so?
I think, devolution in itself creates differences. The social economic makeup of Wales is very different. So unfortunately, the Welsh Conservative Party needs to be, not different on everything, but slightly different on different views. What is right for London is not right for the valleys. What's right for for the southeast of England is not right for the industrial areas of North Wales. And what's right for some of the rural areas in Cumbria is not right for the rural areas of Brecon and Radnor. So I think you do need to have nuances and differences. And Welsh people, this is my interpretation. Welsh people are very proudly Welsh. When you have a Welsh rugby match, I will stand there on the terraces in the millennium. I call it millennium, not the Principality. I'm a traditionalist. In the millennium, I'll be standing there, and I will. If we're playing England, I'll cheer my country on. And I hope we beat them. Any sport. I'm very pleased when Wales beat England. Whether it's football, any sport, it don't matter. Even darts. There's a Welsh player playing an English player. I'm always backing the Welshman. It's that same, but we're inherently British as well, and we care about Britain. We care about our place. Wales was one of the powerhouse of actually Britain at one time. Certain politicians would turn around and say, "Well, that was, Britain made its wealth off the back of Welsh people." And unfortunately, Wales did share in some of that wealth as well. And some people I speak to in South Wales are very proud that there's some of these industrial heartlands, what they did to make Britain the country it was. So people are proud to be British, but they're also proud to be Welsh. And I think proud to be Welsh always comes first. And I think that's why it's important in some areas. You do need nuances on it's not my job to comment on other policy areas, but I'm sure others would probably shout at me for doing that in my group. But no, on economy, we need to have an economy strategy for Wales. That needs to be right, but not just for South Wales. It's got to be right for North, East, South, and West. It's got to be policy for everywhere. Education, the educational makeup in Wales is different. We don't as many teachers as what they have in England, for example. So how do you make teaching more attractive here to come to Wales? In terms of the health system, with the population of Wales is the same to one of our biggest cities in England. Is our health service fit for purpose here? We've got so many health boards. Do they need to be smaller? Do they need to be bigger? Do we need more local healthcare here? Would people in North Wales be happy to go to South Wales for treatment? These are the questions we need to have as a Welsh Conservative Party. And I don't think those questions are helped when we're told by an English the National Party, as such, or when we're in government in Westminster, no, you can't do that because it's in contrary to policy. What's in England? I think there's right to have divergence. Some people will probably say I've gone native on that, and you should be always shouting for what goes on at a Westminster level. But I don't see that. When I was a councillor in Powys, I was always pleased to do things differently because I think what serves us is different to what serves somewhere else. So that's why we've got regional mayors in England for that same principle.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there is a degree to which divergence probably wasn't encouraged when the UK party was in power. And now, if anything, there's probably an appetite amongst Welsh Conservative members to do things very differently than how they're done in England. One of the things that always comes up during the Senedd elections, now we have tax powers, is that there's always been a question of whether the Welsh Conservatives would go into one of those elections recommending that we cut taxes here in Wales. And don't worry, I'm not going to necessarily make you comment on that specifically.
I'm sure my finance spokesperson and our group leader and chief whip would love it if I started making Welsh Conservative finance announcements on the podcast. So,
but it's that kind of stuff that I think is probably something we not necessarily that policy specifically, but we can expect, I imagine, going into 2026, a Conservative Party willing to take very different decisions in the Senedd election than they would have necessarily done in previous Senedd elections when the UK Conservative Party were in power.
Yeah, but it's in discussion with, isn't it? Because this is where the new leader becomes very important to work with the Conservative group in the Senedd. If, for example, we wanted to move around income powers, income rates, that would have to be a discussion that you would have to have with the wider party, not just the party in Wales, but also I think nationally, because you don't want to create disparity across the United Kingdom in terms of tax, and that's somewhere where I've always been, Labour and us have always seen quite eye to eye on tax policy for that simple reason, is because, say, where I live, where businesses do business in England, they do business in Wales. I've got some very good business in my constituency. If I started moving around income tax levels, I would not want them individuals to start saying, well, I'll just move into England because the income tax levels are higher or lower. I think you should have a level playing field of tax. So there are things to look at, but it's whether the UK party would want to do that. How would they feel about that? And that's conversations you have to have because Rebecca Evans worked quite well actually with the UK, and she was finance minister with the UK government around this issue on tax. But there will be elements where we can be different, and I said that's in the economy and in health and education, in rural affairs, for example. I've always been one. I like quite a similar system to England or Scotland because I don't think it's nice to cause an internal division. But then there are different challenges in Wales. There are different challenges regarding water quality here. I can talk on rural affairs because I'm not going to get shouted at by my group for that. So, there are different elements on water quality. There are different issues on woodland creation. Wales is a very diverse country from all its parts. So having an agricultural scheme which actually works for Wales is probably a right thing to do. And I've consulting on one now, my own version of the sustainable farming scheme, which I'm putting forward. Because I think going into that Senedd election, instead of sound bites and clips, you need to actually have something to go to people and say, within the first 100 days, we are going to implement this. And I think that's something that I always say to my colleagues is governments need to hit the ground running. And I think, like we put in the last manifesto, it was a good manifesto, I thought, but it was like, we'll deliver all these bills. And it's like, well, that's fine, but what are you going to do in the first 100 days to really improve people's lives? What tangible differences will people see? And that's what I think we need to do. And that's where policy divergence can be different. But I said on union matters, we will always be aligned with our UK party because that's the way it is. And on certain areas of justice, youth, and different things like that the armed forces will be no divergence because we are aligned as a Conservative party on that. But we're the party of local decision making. Being Conservative does actually mean pushing decisions down to local people. So I always said we weren't really Conservative when we said we shouldn't be doing too much divergence because actually that's what we're about.
So obviously we've talked about the Westminster leadership contest, but
I wonder when this was going to come up. I didn't think we'd get through it all.
There's been a lot of rumours constantly swirling around the press about the leadership of the Welsh Conservative group. What kind of you can comment on them if you want, but I think I can notice a very handy sidestep from your rugby days there, James. But what kind of impact do these constant rumours have on the group and just how you move forward with a Senedd election that is just around the corner, really?
Joe, with all the rumours that go on, and senior Conservative source says, and that generally means a Senedd member in all intents and purposes. Like just get on with the day job. I'm busy as a Senedd member. I was out this morning meeting people. I was out all weekend. I was at a Gurkha celebration event on the weekend, and I was talking at an RABI dinner about the importance of how mental health can be improved across Wales. That I meet people to discuss a number of issues, and people don't ever say to me, "Oh, what's going on in the Conservative group with the leadership?" And it sounds all thing outside of the political bubble. No one really cares. No one cares. People just want us to get on with the job, and I think what's going to happen with the leadership of the Conservative group, I think it causes an unnecessary distraction to the job we're all here for. In my opinion, I think we should just get on with what. I'm the Shadow Rural Affairs Minister. When I wake up in the morning, I don't worry about the Conservative leadership. It's like, how can I improve the lives of farmers across Wales? And I wish that perhaps some of my colleagues had the same view. And I think if we do a good job, we'll get rewarded from the electorate because divided parties do not win elections. They don't. We showed that in Westminster. Jeremy Corbyn's party, when it was divided, didn't win an election. Lo and behold, the Labour Party stuck together with all their internal problems through that general election, and they delivered a win at the general. Because it's a united party wins, divided parties do not. And I would say to any of my colleagues, just keep calm, carry on, and do the day job, and it will all be fine. And we'll be rewarded from the electorate for doing it. Because outside the political bubble and people on certain news outlets online who are quite vocal on Twitter, not this podcast, I would add, listening to them trying to dictate the news is not the way to do politics, in my opinion.
I think it always adds to this element of politics as soap opera, doesn't it, really? And again, whilst I'm sure many of our listeners are particularly interested, but I think broadly speaking, you're right. A lot of the general public all they kind of want to see is competence and some sort of cohesion from their politicians. And it sort of does add into this feeling that, the grown-ups aren't in the room. I think we have all these kind of gossipy chats, don't they, really, rather than, again, going back to what you said, they want to see government delivering for people.
Well, exactly. They want to see government delivering. We only look back at what happened to the Labour Party. I have never seen the Labour Party so, and I am a political anorak. I enjoy politics. As other people, as you do, and other people who are listening to this love politics. The internal wranglings between Jeremy Miles and Vaughan Gethin almost ripped the Welsh Labour Party in half. I've never seen such a divided Senedd group. It was awful. And the members in that group were very glum, very depressed, and very disappointed. They're there to deliver a job. The ex-First Minister, Mark Drakeford, and I were actually on a podcast together. And Mark was saying the same, the government is there to deliver for people. They don't care. They don't want their government or their politicians arguing amongst themselves who's going to be leader. They just want you to get on with the job. Now, whether you agree with the way the government's getting on with the job is another thing, but they want you to get on with it nevertheless. And political distractions don't help. So, as you said, it just looks like a soap opera. People always say politicians are actors who aren't good enough to go into acting. And it actually just sort of feeds into that narrative, doesn't it? I say to some of my colleagues, just remember your job, if you look at the definition of it, is a legislator. It's not a Z-list celebrity. You're not someone who's going to go off in the jungle. That's not your job. You're not going to go on Masked Singer or something like that. That's not your job. Your job is to legislate to make the lives of the people of this country better. That is the core of your job, and to represent your constituents. That should be your focus, not playing up to a media that's narrative is trying to feed this sort of soap opera politics. I'd rather get on with the job than think I'm in an episode of EastEnders, I'll be honest with you.
I mean, I'm very much looking forward to your debut on a Masked Singer next year, James, which is what I just think you've.
I'm actually not bad at singing, but I don't think I don't think I don't think I'd ever subject anything because I pulled my mask off and no one would know who I am.
So we talk about delivery, right? And I think one of the things I'm constantly obsessed with now, as I know a lot of political anoraks are in Wales, is the rise of reform. And I mean, my own personal view is that a lot of the symptoms of that rise could probably be dealt with by governments delivering for people and making themselves feel like they've got a better quality of life. I mean, I think you probably do agree, but do you think that could solve the rise of reform? Or do you think that the numbers we're kind of seeing in polling and modelling, etc., is sort of inevitable now, and there will be a decent, sizable chunk of reform MSs in the next Senedd?
Reform got a lot of votes the last election. I think if they were under PR system, they would have had a lot of members of parliament. No, only on the first past the post system. They got a few members, but not a lot. But if we went on PR, they'd have a lot. I think under the new Senedd system, they're going to get a lot because a lot of people out there, as I said, the people in ex-mine industrial towns in St. Llanelli, Merthyr, Torfaen, all those type areas, even parts of my own constituency, people don't think the government delivers for them. And I say it all stems back to the Brexit referendum. That's where this all comes from. What did the EU deliver for you? I voted leave and I voted leave for the simple reason being, when I look out my window, which is right by here, what did the European Union do for me? Not a great deal. Reform have got that message. It's that simplistic message, isn't it? What does the Welsh, and they will go, what has the Welsh government done for you? A lot of people probably say, well, nothing really. Do I feel better off? Probably not, even though that's more of a Westminster matter. But they will play that message. But I think if government started delivering on people's priorities, not now it's going to sound like I'm soundbiting from the Welsh Conservatives. I'll have to drop in some of our greatest hits, isn't it? More politicians. When I go and speak to people, they don't want 36 more politicians. And even when I try and do the neutral element of it and say, oh, will it increase scrutiny? It'll make people more accountable. People don't buy it. They don't buy it at all. They turn around and say, well, actually, I just want to get a GP appointment. I want to get a hospital appointment. I've been on a waiting list for 2.5 years. I paid into the system my whole life, and now I can't use it. I'm waiting. People with education, people with ALN, children with ALN, can't get placed in school. They can't get the support. They can't get the development needs that they require. Do they want 36 more politicians? That can help them? Probably not, because it's not going to improve. I don't think it'll improve things, but that's my view. And that's where I think it feeds into the narrative government don't deliver. We try and tinker around the edges with things. We don't actually take on the big issues head on. It's where somewhere actually where you get political agreement. Loathe him or love him, Alan Davis, for example. Alan and I will sit down and fundamentally agree. NHS needs radical reform. It's not fit for purpose for the 21st century. It's not fit and purpose for the modern day health needs of Wales. Our education system needs an overhaul. But these are big, big challenges. And sometimes you need government, and that's the Welsh government, the UK government do the same. It's all short-termism, isn't it? We'll try and make short-term changes that look good rather than a bit more longer term pain for longer term gain in a way. And I think we shy away from making big decisions. And it's happened, Margaret Thatcher made some decisions which I think were for the better of the country. Some people would probably want to literally knife me from behind saying that. People don't like Mrs. Thatcher, and that's fair enough. That's up to them. But she made some fundamental changes to the country, which were very, very painful. But in my view, they improved the country. You wouldn't get most governments doing that now because they turn around and think, oh, an opinion poll is going to come out. I'm going to be very unpopular. I'm going, and that's where this Z-list celebrity politician comes into it, doesn't it? That people are more concerned about their public images rather than actually doing the right thing. And I think I'm probably being too candid now about my views on politics, but that's as I said, and that's where reform, back to the initial question, fit that narrative. They say things that people want them that think don't get said. They will say, yes, the NHS is broken. It needs fundamental reform, and we'll do that. We'll reform your education system. We'll change the economy. Even if you look at their policies now, actually means a lot more big state on a lot of it, which a lot of their voters wouldn't dare to go near. But they say the simple message which cut through. And I think they're a symptom of government not making decisions, not making the longer term decisions to improve people's lives. So just tinker around the edges, constitutional reform. No one cares. No one cares. They just want to get a GP appointment. They want to make sure the kid goes to a good school. They want to make sure the bins are collected. That's what my constituents care about. I'm sure that's what you care about, Matt, really deep down. We all care about other issues, but mostly the general population only care what's 10 metres from their front door. And that is the truth of the matter. Council elections, I always said that. If you win elections 10 metres from someone's front door, you've won the election. It's quite simple.
All politics is local. It's a fascinating moment, though, I think, for the Welsh political class to kind of wrap their heads around, isn't it? I think because it's so easy for a lot of people to label reform as populists, whereas for me, I think that's one, far too simplistic description, but also two, fundamentally, politics is about winning people's votes, right? So you kind of have to be popular. So I think all the incumbent established parties now are starting to think about how to take on reform. But I think there's a danger, and I wonder if you agree with me, there's a danger that we're treating it too simplistically. It's like, they're just populists. They've actually got no substance. And we're not actually getting to grips with a lot of the anger that's behind a lot of that voting intention.
Yeah, I agree. And there's one thing, and I say this to people. I think you get reform or you don't get reform. I would like to say I get reform. I understand, but I think that's more, and it sounds awful, and it's just to most political politicians. I think the politicians are more ingrained in their communities to do a lot more, outreach. Not your surgeries, but going around your rugby clubs. Going to a coffee morning. I think you'll start to get it then because you can understand what people are saying and what There's people vote reform last time in my constituency who I never thought would vote reform, but they say certain things and things resonate with people. So they're saying, I want my country back. If I heard that once, I heard it a million times during the general election. I want my country back. But it's a simplistic view. But people of a certain generation think this country is fundamentally different to what it was 20, 30 years ago, for example. But you've got to understand that people are very angry. There's a lot of anger out there at the minute with the political establishment. All the goings on recently in Westminster from my party are now carried on through what Keir Starmer has been doing. Don't help any of that. It feeds reform. It feeds their narrative. Oh, look, Politicians, heads in the trough, taking what they can get. They give nothing back to the public. I find that very offensive when people say that because, I spend a lot of time with my community. I do a lot for my community. So I find it very offensive. But then when stuff goes on in Westminster, I sit there and think, oh, I'm doing a good job. And all those people somewhere else are just knocking it back again. Because one bad person or bad, PR taints everybody. But they all look at us the same. As people say to me, "Oh, James, why don't you join Reform?" I love a pound for every time I've heard that. James, join Reform because you say what they think and you're one of us. And it's like, what do you mean I'm one of you? Oh, would you just believe you say it as it is? It's like, well, I'm not because I say it as it is because that's the way I was brought up, and I care about policy and I care about improving people's lives. And there's a simplistic way of doing that, and there's a difficult way of doing that. It's a quote I once heard: "There's doing what's easy and there's doing what's right." And I always think that you've got to do what's right, not what's easy. And I think if you started doing things like that, reform would go away. Hence why I back Robert Genrich, because Robert Genrich is on that same page with me. You can do what's easy. That's the easy things, are fine. Reform are very simplistic. I had a leaflet come through. Want your country back? Question mark. Stop the boats. Well, as a layman on the street, go, yeah, that sounds great, but that's very simplistic. You can't just stop the boats. It doesn't work like that. There's a lot of policy changes need to make that happen. So you've got to get back to substance. And I think if people understood why these people are angry, I think it would just solve things. Politicians are saying, "I'm sorry." If I do something wrong, if I burn the tea and Emma isn't very happy, or I don't make her a cup of tea, that type of thing downstairs, if I don't say sorry to her, I look like an arrogant pig. Let's be honest, I look like an arrogant person. If I didn't bumped into somebody in the co-op here in Talgath and just wandered off and didn't say sorry, they think, "What an arrogant bloke." But I don't. I say, "Oh, I'm very sorry. I'm sorry for doing that. If I do things wrong, I was always brought up to apologize." But politicians have come to this saying, "Well, don't ever say sorry. Don't apologize for anything." And I'm afraid you lose the public in and reform. So look, they've done all this to the country and they still even won't even say sorry to you. Keir Starmer will to get up and do a say, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done it." And I think a lot of it would have gone away. But unfortunately, you've got spin doctors behind the scenes who think it's a weak thing to apologize. I don't think it is, and I think we need to get back to a bit of good old-fashioned manners, I think, and holding yourself to high standards.
I mean, a lot of people are looking at the new Senedd polling and thinking, oh, the Conservatives in Reform, they're going to get fairly close. Maybe that's enough for a governing coalition. But from the sounds of it, you think that there are still some really fundamental differences between Reform and the Conservative Party. Could that make a coalition really difficult in your eyes?
I'm a pragmatist. If someone said to me, "Would you work with X?" I've got a mental health bill going through, which is a backbench piece of legislation. I've worked very closely with the Labour Party on its development. I'm a pragmatist. I want to make changes. I'm pragmatic to do that. And I think you never say no to nothing. If it come down to it and there was a national emergency, would I work with the Labour government? Of course I would, to put things right. People say, "Oh, you shouldn't say that," but if things were that bad and we had to get things right, I work with anybody to put the country right. May have a fundamental disagreement of policy, but most politicians agree. We just disagree in the way we want to get there to our end goal. But I'd work with anybody. I've always said that because it's about improving people's lives. And that is what we should be about. And whether you've got to work with Reform or Plaid, you know, I'll work with anybody to get improvements in my constituency. That's just the nature of what I do. Other colleagues may be different. There could be Conservative Party members might listen to this podcast and think I'm the Satan reincarnated, because I would work with another political party. Well, unfortunately, getting real change and real delivery takes difficult decisions. And if it means I had to work with Reform because there was enough of us to make a government, I do that. But there'd have to be some clear policies there of how we're going to improve things, not just sound bites. I want my country back. There's certain things I think we need to change nationally, but it's not as simple as saying I want my country back. It's a whole step to get to a certain place, and that's where political coalitions work. The Labour Party and the Plaid have worked together with a cooperation agreement because they've got common aims and common goals. It can work. I don't agree with what Plaid and Labour have done on certain things, but it can work. And I would work with anybody to deliver improvements. And to all those Conservative Party other members who say you shouldn't be saying that, I said, put yourself in my shoes and the people who come and see me on a daily basis and want a doctor's appointment. If you were desperate, you'd work with anybody to get that doctor's appointment.
You mentioned your bill, your mental health bill.
Yes.
Could you give us a bit of an explanation for those who aren't in the know about that bill? You mentioned it does seem to have good levels of support from the Welsh Government.
Yeah.
Explain a bit about the bill. And
so what I want to do, this is one thing where I actually disagreed with the UK party publicly. Probably didn't do my political career any good, but hey ho, that's just that's the breaks you get, isn't it? But when the UK government decided to pause the mental health legislation reforms that they were doing in Westminster, I was really annoyed. Really annoyed. I don't normally get annoyed about most things. I'm quite a placid individual, but that really did annoy me because the Mental Health Act is completely out of date. It's completely out of date. It needs total reform because of where we are now and where we need to get to. My party paused that. I was quite public against that. So I was actually drawn then in a backbench bill. I could put in a backbench legislation. I thought, right, how can I deliver mental health reform changes within Wales within the devolved competencies? So before my bill was introduced, I had a chat with the minister, I had a chat with my political group, a chat with the Royal College of Psychiatrists, Mind, of Eriad, and come up with something that's sort of the Mental Health Standards of Care Bill, which doesn't amend a huge amount, but amends what we can control here in Wales. So my bill at initial stage was bigger. It was about remote virtual assessments. It was around nominated persons. It's around changing the rights of a child to be reassessed. It's around allowing second opinion doctors to come in, which is very difficult under the current system around care and treatment planning. But the bill has morphed and changed, but that is the nature of politics. Things change. The UK Labour Government have decided to reintroduce the mental health bill, and they're going to deliver that probably by next year. Great. I'll sit with them and say, good on you. We should have done it anyway. Get on with it. But there are certain things around changing the mental health measure, for example, which are Wales specific only legislation. So things around allowing children to be reassessed. How that was missed initially, I'll never know, but the time has changed. We've now got the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So children have got rights. So I'm putting that in. Nominated persons is still up to be discussed, and also second opinion doctors, because that may be taken forward. But this is the pragmatism of me, and I think one of perhaps my strengths as a politician, I could have easily dug my heels in and said, no, I want it exactly the same as what I put in to start with. But I said no, because I risk losing a very narrow chance to improve. And the one thing I want to improve is the rights of children to be reassessed. And if I had that chance lost because I was so dogmatic in my view to say I want it my way or the highway, I'd never sleep at night because I think I've let young people across Wales down. So my bill's very focused now. It's morely focused on the amending the mental health measure. But if I can do that, it's a small change, a very small change, but a very needed change and one which could help many young people across Wales. And if I've had to work with the Labour Party to do that, so be it, because if it improves the lives of young people across Wales, then that's what my job is. I'm here to legislate to improve lives. And if I don't do that, I think what's the point of me being in politics?
James, no finer note to end on. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Hiraeth. If you like what you heard, please don't forget to subscribe, rate and review.